Without further ado, I'm going to pass the word to Professor Umara. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. It is my great pleasure to be one of the panelists in today's discussion titled Inclusion versus Exclusion, Risks and Opportunities at the World Reconstruction Conference taking place here in Geneva. In my capacity as the former Commissioner for Reconstruction, Rehabilitation and Resettlement in Borno State, which is located far north of Nigeria, having a population of about 6 million people and a landmass of about 76,000 square kilometers. The Boko Haram crisis has triggered acute humanitarian and post-displacement crisis with devastating social and economic impact. Further deepening fragility and poverty in the Northeast sub-region. While I wanted to just give you a brief description of what has happened in my home state, bearing in mind that the northeastern states consists of 6 states: Borno, Adama, Yobe, Gombe, and Taraba states. But mainly, the 3 states of Taraba, Gombe, and Bauchi are displacement-affected states, while the main 3 states are really affected states. In the last 4 years, the Boko Haram insurgents have destroyed about 5,000 classrooms in Borno State alone. About 241 health centers were destroyed. About 1,631 water distribution points were destroyed. About 800 municipal buildings comprising of local government secretariat, police station, traditional leaders' houses were destroyed. About 731 energy distribution lines were destroyed. More than 30,000 people were killed. About 500,000 livestock were also killed. The worst is also that of destruction of our ecosystem. So I think the major problem that we have experienced is as a result of social exclusion. So the Northeast has sustained about 9.2 billion worth of infrastructural damage and accumulated output losses of an estimated $8.3 billion. The rate of destruction was so enormous. To efficiently reconstruct our societies and effectively tackle the insurgency, we need to recognize that exclusion is a problem, understand it better, and where appropriate, find different ways of working with partner governments, the international community and civil society organizations to overcome the root causes of exclusion in our society. So the causes of the Boko Haram insurgencies include, but not limited to, the following: pervasive illiteracy, endemic poverty, poor social and economic outcomes, poor economic infrastructure, unemployment, drug abuse, environmental degradation, climate change, among others. Then the opportunities that an inclusive approach can bring, and how can this contribute to creating more just and resilient societies, include inclusive approach to development, encourages ownership and sustainability of projects. Based on our own experience in Borno during the last 4 years, I would like to share 3 key thoughts with you These thoughts are using community as key actor and beneficiary for recovery, ownership of recovery efforts, and the need for an integrated approach. Note that our approach in Borno, as well as other 5 states of the northeastern Nigeria, has evolved over the years as we are experimenting with different methodologies. Overall, it is important to remain flexible and adjust approaches as you go. This requires continuous and honest monitoring and the ability to adjust interventions at any point. Flexibility needs to be, in fact, built into programming from the onset. It requires agile programming and agile funding. From a sustainability perspective, there are 3 key risks that we have encountered in the northeastern states when implementing approaches that were not guided by the principles of inclusiveness. First, a humanitarian approach does not provide sustainability of relief efforts. We have learned that people need to be empowered to rebuild their lives from the outset with gradually increasing responsibility. Secondly, gains from recovery efforts that are not agreed with and carried by the beneficiaries will not be maintained. And thirdly, approaches that do not address needs and root causes in an integrated fashion are doomed to fail. Using communities as key actors and beneficiaries for recovery, when social protection networks are destroyed after a crisis, it is critical to strengthen the resilience of the communities. In a post-crisis context, it is not possible to immediately rebuild basic service provision in a comprehensive way. Because right now, we are managing 2 stages. Both the stabilization and the recovery phase are concurrently ongoing in the Northeast sub-region. Community ownership in rebuilding affected territories is critical. We have also learned that the communities need to be involved as soon as interventions are being designed. During our discussions yesterday, I have enumerated 1 great challenges as one lack of community participation in designing our reconstruction effort. It is to be noted that such approach requires time and patience. Before contractors have been asked to rebuild community infrastructure and before livelihood support is being provided, communities need to be consulted and made part of the design. In fact, approaches that bring together communities, traditional authorities, and public administration representatives have proven to be best. The need for integrated approaches. Given the volatile security environment and overwhelming needs in Borno and other states of the Northeast, we initially tried to implement single projects such as the rebuilding of hospitals, schools, water systems across Borno, targeting as many LGAs as possible. We found out that this approach is not sustainable, it's cumbersome, and therefore we shifted our goal towards an integrated approach that encompasses efforts need to reach the hearts and minds of the people, not only physical infrastructure. Only an integrated approach that provides targeted communities at the same time with essential infrastructure such as hospital, water supply, strengthening the security and the resilience, and overall provision of livelihood support have shown good and sustainable results. It is also critical that communities adopt and carry a vision for their future, a vision that addresses their grievances, their concerns, and their hopes in tandem with their own cultural aspirations and cultural values. In its effort for this reason that we have started in 2017 to implement integrated community recovery and resilience interventions, we have in fact developed this approach in consultation with UNDP. In addition, we have started to work on reconciliation. This means that people need to be able to articulate their grievances. It is only when people feel that they are heard that they will start to think about their future. In summary, recovery effort in a post-crisis environment carry risks that need to be acknowledged and carried jointly by all stakeholders. Then I also wish to bring to your kind notice that we have been receiving some support resulting from the outcome of the Recovery and Peace-Building Assessment conducted by the World Bank, EU, and the UN, with the support of the government of the 6 northern states and that of the federal government. The World Bank, UNDP, UNHCR, DFID, USAID, among others, have been contributing towards reducing the menace in our region. But our major challenges are one, that of coordination of stabilization and recovery efforts in our own region. That remains our huge challenge. Because most of the development partners do use to come to our region with a tailor-made strategist. So our main focus should be a community-driven approach, a bottom-top approach. And I think that is what we are listening this morning. The second most problem is that of lack of coherent community-driven approach. Sustainable recovery efforts need to draw on and work with remaining community structures and capacities, ensure community ownership, and address needs in an integrated fashion. They do not need to engage the hearts and minds of the people who have suffered most. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Umara, for that really rich presentation. And I think there's, you're talking about crisis recovery, but I think there's so many lessons that we can and need to apply in disaster recovery as well. Let's move on to another region of the world, Japan. Murakami-san, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Kiyoshi Murakami. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Kiyoshi Murakami. As the Madam Chair introduced, I have been working with the city of Rikuzen-Takata, Japan, as the special representative mayor, and also senior executive advisor to the city. But at the same time, I'm working for this university called the Iwate National University in Japan, as well as the special advisor to the president. Now, I'm going to go through quickly what basically happens. Unlike that, the Boko Haram's case in Nigeria, this is more like the disaster actually occurred in Japan, and so that's what basically happens. So now I'm just go through the geological area, actually where my city is. This is Japan, and then also it's 500 kilometers north from Tokyo. And also, this is a very, very coastal side and a very, very rural area. The photo shows that basically this is the previous scenery of my hometown, together with the lot of pine tree forest and the beach, and also a lot of the tourists come here. So this is before the tsunami happens, and the whole city was covered by the mostly forest, and over 80% of forest, less than 20% of flat area, which actually has the industries, and also the inhabitants were there. So this is as you may know, in March 11, 2011, we actually had a very strong earthquake at scale of 9.0, and at the time of 2:46 p.m. Now, this is after the earthquake happens in the Rikuzen-Takata, so that there are no building was basically collapsed. building was okay. Nothing basically harmed. But the number of we actually announced the number of the alert to the residents to evacuate immediately to the higher ground. It doesn't go to, I don't know where. Okay, here you go. All right, so I'm just going to go through. However, tsunami comes to the whole city and then end up with the whole city is gone in 10 minutes. And then this is City Hall. It was completely also destroyed. So that's among the 24,000 people, we actually end up with almost 1,800 people died. And also the 13,000 people were displaced from the house. And the whole city was completely destroyed. Where should I? Maybe here. I don't know. Okay, here you go. Yeah, and then this is among 70,000 pine trees, only one pine tree left. So this is now become kind of a symbolic figure for the recovery and the reconstruction of the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunamis. So this is more like the symbol of the constructions now. Doesn't go through. Okay. Oops. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is the casualties, loss of life, loss of houses, and I just go through. This is the life at the emergency shelter, but emergency shelter was not well prepared because that most of the designated area was completely destroyed wiped out by the tsunami. So that the people had to go to any available the space that are actually open. This is the auditorium of the elementary school. However, a few days later, we received a number of the support from the internally by the government as well as the NGOs, also from the people from outside of Japan. So this is a temporary housing unit. Still, a lot of people, at the time of the 2011, we actually had over 2,000 the temporary housing for the covering 6,000 people. Still, this year, we have 275 units. For serving for the almost 700 people. So we are still working on the reconstruction after 8 years. Oops. Somewhere it's not okay. So in order for us to rebuild the whole city, we actually we will build whole city with the 2 phases with the 8-year plan. However, 8-year plan actually did not complete it. But we actually put together the 3 basic the concept. One is to build back better, resilient city, and inclusive society with accessibility. Through our experiences in the tsunami disaster, we have distinguished. We designed and made a recovery and a destruction plan based on this concept. We never want to have the same experience in Rikuzen and Takata, and to create a resident city for the next generations. We made massive and a gigantic project of the rebuilding whole city by placing 42 feet high seawalls surrounding the bay, elevating city center with 32 feet high with this soil and rocks delivered by the world's largest conveyor belt from the mountain 2 miles away. So the elevation of city center has been almost done now. So now shopping malls has started and the businesses on the elevated landscape of 32 feet high since last year. So, and then connecting with the shopping mall, we have now the user-friendly and universal designed public libraries, kids park, event house, and so on. It is very, very crucial for us to tsunami disaster survivors to share our experiences and lessons learned. So most of the tsunami covered area will be renewed with National Memorial Park. The city of Rikuzen Takata, cooperated with national and prefecture governments, has decided to remain several destroyed buildings as monuments of the tsunami experience. The Miracle Pine Tree roadside shopping stations, watchtower schools buildings, and 5-story apartments building will be also kept as a legacy of the disaster. Now I'm going to go show you. It doesn't go to. I don't know how. Can you put the next slide? It doesn't go through. Yeah. So this is the largest conveyor belt, and then next one. And then also, as I mentioned, that the three basic concepts now becomes like our basis for the rebuilding a whole city, as part of the inclusiveness is very, very important for us. Okay. Okay, next one, please. So as I mentioned, that through our exercise, based on the inclusiveness, we used number of the people. We actually asked the people in diversified people to join for that process of the developments of the number of projects. For the designing of cities and also the development of programs. Okay, next one. And then also we use the abandoned school to be university facilities for providing the internationally the disaster management programs. Okay, next one. So together with the also we conduct a number of the evacuation exercise together with the people with the people special needs. Next one, please. And then also people with students who are also special needs get together to discuss about for the future of their careers as well. Next one. And also, as part of the Build Back Better concept, of course, inclusive community is very, very important for us to set up the para sports facilities for those people who are special needs. And then also, as I mentioned, that universal design of a town is very important, so that we actually have the number of the checking time to have special people with special needs to join to the assess that what needs to be done for the future of the city. And then the new industries created, and also the international friendship actually established by that with a number of other countries supported us. Okay, next one. Next one, please. And then finally, this is the basic concept that we really using that's the SDGs philosophy into that the development of the whole city based on the 17 goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Murakami, for that very fascinating and comprehensive presentation. Very good lessons also. Mino, shall we give you the floor? 10 minutes?
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Good morning, everyone. Just before starting, I wanted just to state that Warrior Commission is a global movement of grassroots women that are present around approximately 50 countries in the world. I'm just going to take some cases from Africa. Since I'm from Madagascar, I'm going to talk about a bit what is happening in terms of recovery in Madagascar, and then also the case of Zimbabwe. Because of the tsunami that happened there in the last few weeks ago, when we are looking into the case of what happened in Chimanimani district when the authorities now decided to work on the recovery system. We saw that we have groups that are organized in that area, but the women were not involved, and we saw that this lack of involvement and this exclusion of the woman working on the ground, knowing what is happening in their own community, had a cost, because of the issue that were not addressed of the cultural norms and the gender bias that were still strongly happening in the communities. The fact that women did not participate in the planning in the recovery planning, a lot of their needs were left behind, and also lessons learned were not received within the community by the women, because they were not part of the design, and they have local strategies that could have been used in the recovery. And then one of the recommendations that we found out is, like, we need really to prepare and invest in the grassroots women and in the grassroots groups in addressing issues of hazard, and on the information, because if the information were passed through those organized groups, it would have the loss would have been less. So that's the idea that we want now to really work closely with the government to address this information bias that are existing at the local level. And then also in the issue of planning, I'm taking, for example, the example of Antananarivo. We have some area in the slums that is really every year flooded, but because of the communities are not included in the planning in the city, then every year the same groups, the same vulnerable groups, have the same loss, because if one of the group left the area, another one is coming in. And so we really need to look into how to include the local communities in the planning of the city, for example, to really avoid those repetitive loss. And the idea is really to tap into those existing organized group that are already doing the mapping and looking at where are the risks within the communities, so that this lesson is now integrated within the community. Also, in terms of the monitoring system, we are doing this, getting this external monitoring and a system that we are coming from outside, and although there are forces and there are skills that is existing within the communities that could be used, and it would also reduce the issues of corruption and eviction of the victims when the government is coming in to just help. For the help, we see that the really vulnerable groups are put aside and not benefiting from the relief system. And another point is, when we are talking about investment and financing the recovery system, it is important to ensure that women and the communities are really fully engaged in the planning and in the delivery of those financing, and one main point that we really are keen within Waru Commission is the partnership, and a meaningful partnership for a meaningful engagement. So really that what we are talking about, inclusion, it's not only a word that is stated up there, but it's really practiced on the ground. And when we are looking into recovery, when we have these local communities, and especially our grassroots women group, we are not looking into recovery, but also the issue of preparedness, and how can we still support the organizing force of the grassroots women to ensure that as what happened in Japan is now also cannot happen elsewhere. So for us, inclusiveness is key on this issue, but we want to say that recovery is something that is too late. We need some preparedness so that it's not acting. We are being proactive but not reactive, and. We want to say that although grassroots women are not considered sometimes as real stakeholders within the recovery process, they are really investing a lot of what they have in rebuilding. So I think that's important. And one of the last point maybe I want to make is the importance of building capacity and peer learning. So we are having right now also another event happening that we are calling the Grassroots Academy, where other grassroots women are explaining and how they have expressed the loss that they got in hazard, in disaster, and how they have coped with it, and how they are now reducing this risk. So everyone is invited. We are closing this afternoon. It's in Maison de la Paix, Pétale 5, room C1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mino, for shedding some light on the role of grassroots women as designers and builders of resilience. Okay, I am going to hand the floor over to Pablo Suarez, who's going to take us through the dialogue. Thanks, Pablo.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, organizing team, for inviting the possibility to infuse interaction into this event. This session is about inclusion versus exclusion. And very often, even in the design of conferences, which are meant to be to talk about inclusion versus exclusion, we create a very exclusive dynamic where those of us on this side are included in the talking, and you are including in the passive listening. And that is not very conducive for the gestation of new ideas, for the identification of problems where we can work together to do something about it. Let me try if that device works. Otherwise, I will be asking for passing.
I don't know, maybe
we will give it a try. I think it's not going to work for my fingers either. May I request the next? Excellent. So we're going to have a little bit of a debating time. Not debate between Margaret and I or between the three panelists, but amongst you. We're going to invite you to identify rich areas for conversation. I warn you, expect some confusion. This portion is intentionally designed to push you into an area that is slightly outside of your comfort zone. It's very safe, but you may be a little bit confused. It's okay. Confusion is where our brains get active. It should also be fun. You should experience humor. Humor, like Reconstruction, focuses on the gap between what is and what should be. So let's see how it goes. Next, please. This is what our events look like. This is what we look like when we're in a place where things are being conversed. And they're very important, and it is natural to have to check email, especially when you're not included in what's going on. Next, please. So you're going to have a task. When I do this gesture, can you pass to the next slide? I don't know who I am talking to, but there we go. I will show you some cartoons. Your first task is to look at the cartoons. Just try to notice what's going on. Moving on. Next one, please. Your next task is to try to find some connection to what brings us together. Again, please. It is about inclusion versus exclusion. Can you notice that in the cartoon? Next, please. It is about challenges and opportunities. What is good, what is doable, what is difficult? Next, please. And it is about the topic of reconstruction. I warn you, the cartoons are not about it. Like, I work a lot on climate change. There are cartoons about climate change, but the best humor is the one that doesn't depict the polar bear or the rising waters. It's something else that indirectly connects. I will make you work. You will have to discover what connections may exist in your opinion or experience between the cartoons that we will see and your impressions of inclusion versus exclusion, risk and opportunities, and reconstruction. Next one. So, it may look like things are normal for most people, but things may change abruptly. And when abrupt change happens, we don't know how to deal with it. And if there is a destruction of the couch or a destruction of the relationship between these two humans, how do we intend to go about the process of reconstruction? Bob Mankoff, the cartoonist who created this, gave it a caption that I think works for us. Next, please. It says, Brad, we've got to talk. So here, my friends, we've got to talk, and you are going to do the talking. Next, please. Humor enables us to have difficult conversations. If we see something, thanks. This you think may work. Let's give it a try. If you see something that makes you smile, makes you recognize a shade of your reality, then it's easier to start a conversation where you confide that, you know, what I see in this cartoon is similar to what I see in my work life. The moment of truth. Am I going to know what button to push here? Oh, there it is, a big green button with an arrow. Important looking person on the phone. No, Thursday won't work. How about never? Is never good for you? This cartoon, says Bob Mankoff in his TED Talk, it works as humor because it combines the language of diplomacy with the content of, I don't care about you. I want to exclude you from my agenda for the rest of our lives. Do you recognize this when the vulnerable people are going to ask for support in the reconstruction process? How is it similar or different from your experience? Crystal ball lady looks into the future and says, you will make the same foolish mistakes you have made before, not only once, but many, many times again. Does it sound familiar? Does anybody have a crystal ball that looks into the future and says something different? We will not make the same mistakes. After this event, everything will be awesome. The intricate mechanics of government. For some, the entrance goes direct to the big desk at the center of the system. For others, it is a little bit more complicated. You have to crouch, you get lost, you don't know where to go. If you have mobility problems, if you don't know how to read, if you don't remember the path, you're out. You will never make it to that center of decisions. Can you recognize our systems? Is reconstruction looking like this? One door for data processing, the other for data suppression. There's teams that are dedicated to not letting others know the truth, the facts. I am from Argentina. I could tell you stories about how intentionally, in previous years when I was still living there, intentionally there were entities who were not letting others know data. Is that relevant for your work on reconstruction? Speaker shows a very elaborate graph and says, I'll pause for a moment so you can let this information sink in. I see laughter happening in all of them. This one, I was the perpetrator of this. I am a math geek. I used to be a system dynamics modeler, communicating science, showing very truthful graphs about the complexity of systems and climate and disasters and reconstruction, and no one had a clue what I was talking about. I was saying, this is it, check it out. And of course, I was excluding others because of the gap that I wasn't aware of between the mathematical language, which is my language, but not necessarily the language of people at risk, people in governance, donors, partners, and so on. A long line for information where it takes time, and someone says, hey, that other line is moving a lot faster. It's the line for misinformation. Sometimes the thing that is not aligned with truth gets more share, gets more spreading, gets more clientele. Do you recognize this pattern in your work, in your challenges, in your opportunities? Very busy people carrying stones, possibly for reconstruction, in a cart that has a square wheel. Someone offers more effective round wheels. No, thanks, we're too busy. Do you recognize anything about the room for integrating innovation into your systems? How welcoming are we in our processes for design, implementation, evaluation of reconstruction? A person sees a 6, another person sees a 9, and they disagree. Just because you're right does not mean I am wrong, says the cartoonist. Do you notice ever in your work that two people are discussing strongly and both are saying something perfectly valid, but there's an inability to listen, to put yourself in the other person's shoes, whether it's global versus local, whether it's government versus civil society, whether it's rich versus poor? How is this resonant? If you cannot read, like me, from the distance, there's a traffic jam, infinite cars not moving, and one of the passengers says to the driver, try honking again. Guess what? You can honk all you want. It won't move. Honking will not work. I sense that in our sector of disaster preparedness, response, reconstruction, we are honking and honking and honking again. Is there something that you recognize in your work life, in your service, in your experience, where we're trying again something that we know does not work? So you have a flavor of some cartoons. Your task, when I say ready, set, go, not yet, will be to first self-organize in groups of 3 or 4. If you're 2, it can get too slow. If you're 5, it may get too much that you have to wait for others to speak. But you will self-organize as you want. Panel, you can stay on the stage, or one of you can go migrate, or whatever you want. Self-organize, move about the room as needed. You will say, you know, this particular cartoon really echoed with me. It talks of something that matters to me. And then you will try to identify one issue that we need to talk about. Remember the first cartoon? We've got to talk. What is it that creates tension, or there's a contradiction between this and that, or there's incongruity, things don't fit, or there's a danger that people are not noticing? What are we unable to converse about that today we can try? That will be your task. A reminder of the cartoons. Oh, and by the way, by the end of less than 15 minutes, you will have to write a question, one question per group. You will find some white papers near your tables, which can be a question for one of the panelists. You can say, Madam Mina, can you tell us da-da-da? Or it could be for the panel at large, or it could be for all of us. What question is worth asking? Interesting question. So let's see if I can get the arrow to go back to your task. Yes, it works. And it should, of course I forgot there. Thanks. So this is what you have to do. Self-organize. You have less than 15 minutes. Ready, set, go.
You don't have the slide with all of them to remind me?
I forgot to mention that. If you're trying to remember the cartoons, well, you know what? They'll figure it out. Here are the cartoons in one slide if you want to see them. Thanks for reminding me. So we'll give it less than 15 minutes. Hello friends, can I have your attention please? Can I have your attention please? Thank you. It's very good to notice that you want to talk to each other and not listen to me. But now I have to give you an instruction. If someone near you is conversing, can you please gently touch? Excellent, thank you. Now we got the silence. I know this will look ridiculous. Please do as I say. Put in one of your hands, if you can, a little finger up. Like this, everybody. Extend your arm if you can, so there's no bending of the elbow. When I say ready, set, go, you will point to a person that will write a question on behalf of your group. Ready, set, go. Self-organize. Okay, friends, can I have your attention again? Hello, thank you. So, one person per group was tasked with writing a question. Find a paper like this on any of the tables. That person will write that question. Everybody else, it can be a question to the panelists, in which case please write the name of the panelist or the country of the panelist so we know who to give the paper to. It can be a general question for panelists, or it can be a general question for all of us, which we may read. There's too many groups, so we don't have time for everyone. Your question has to be interesting so that we take it up here. Some of you will be excluded, I promise. Now, while the people who write the question, thank you. Check out the silence, it's so elegant. So, while one person per group writes the question, the other people in the group have a task. It's a complicated task, especially if there are multiple languages in the group. You have to live with it. We're going to have an unusual conversation per group. In this conversation, each person can say only one word. So, for example, in this group, the gentleman over here may be the first person to say a word that in his opinion matters about everything that we spoke about. So, for example, he could say exclusion. The person next to him is going to listen attentively and say another word that he associates with that. Whatever you want, there isn't a wrong word, but it has to be a different word, but related to it. So if he said exclusion, you could say privilege, or you could say racism, or you could say legislation. Let's imagine you say legislation. The person next to you is going to listen attentively and say another word. The other word could be, I don't know, change. Or it could be women. Or it could be empowerment. Next person listens and says some other word. And you will go around 3 or 4 cycles while we collect the papers. So one person per group, bring the papers to the front. Everybody else have a conversation, listen attentively, speak clearly so that the entire group listens. It may get a little loud. After a minute or two, at most 3, I will ask you to please bring silence again so we come back to the panel. Is it clear? Self-organize. Whoever wants to start, start. One word at a time. Bring your questions in the paper to the front. Starting, ready, set, go. Okay, friends. The panel in the front is choosing some questions. So 3, 2, 1, stop and silence, please. We have a few minutes left. Let's see, they're still choosing. You gave them a difficult task. May I suggest that we start with the first panelists? May I have your attention? They are also very busy. Maybe we can invite our guest from Japan to choose one of his questions and share his answer. And then the rest of the panelists will follow. Over to you. As you can tell, interaction creates confusion and friction and difficulty, but it can be worth it. There we go.
Can we see the others?
Okay. Well, thank you very much for Pablo for organizing this great exercise. It is very interesting to see, and also I really appreciate that people actually get together to come up with the questions. Now, there are several questions to Japan. I think that so I would take the one thing is that organization resistant innovations, how can you fast track the uptake of the innovations? I think this is a very interesting question. Well, I think there are a number of of course, as you see on your cartoon, there's the people carrying the staff without having a very good, the tools to use, because the people say, I'm so busy. I think it happens a lot of the cases, and not only here in Japan, but also a number of the other countries too. So it is very important for us to understand and to communicate with the people. So this is more like here it comes to inclusive and exclusions. So I think it is very important to discuss with the people who are on the ground. So in case of Rikuzen Takada, for us to, it takes 2 years, almost a year and a half to come up with that consultation and also agreement with the local residents. So to come up with the reconstruction plan itself. Even still, we actually conducting a number of the consultation with the local residents, as well as a number of different people, different type of the people, so that we can learn so many ideas, so many proposals from the various people, so that we can take it into the new policy making. So I think this is very important to collaborate and also communicate together with, and also consult with those different people, particularly people with special needs. This is we really take into that account, so that we really want to have their opinion impressed into our policy in the programs. That's how we do.
Thank you. And if I may, while the other two panelists choose one, I want to highlight one thing that we heard from the case of Japan. Remember, the longest conveyor belt in the planet has been helping reconstruction after the tsunami. Now think of the conveyor belt as a metaphor. A long conveyor belt takes something from here and brings it there. Who gets to receive what is conveyed? And who gets to decide what gets on the belt? Sometimes I work with the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center. My colleagues receive donations of bottled water, which clogs the conveyor belt. Who makes decision? How are we going to include or exclude people in decision making? What can we do before the shock so we have a pre-existing plan? Maybe we can start as soon as the forecast says that a giant cyclone or hurricane is likely to go. Let's start thinking of that conveyor belt, not only the physical, but the metaphorical one. The flow of information, the flow of people, the flow of decisions. Thank you very much. Who wants to, oh yes, please.
Just for the comments on that, for the conveyor belt, the world's largest conveyor belt. Actually, we didn't plan actually in advance. We didn't know what needs to be done, because in order for us to minimize the time for the construction itself, the conveyor belt actually created. So if we didn't use that conveyor belt, it would take 10 years more, time to rebuild the whole city. So that's the reason why the conveyor belt actually creates the accelerate the timing. The timing was also very important, the elements for us.
While I wanted to respond to one very important question, how to involve the affected population in the reconstruction phase. I think this is a very important question. So often, development partners or implementers do used to go to community with design without community participation. And I think the best option is, first of all, to understand the baseline, to have a baseline survey of the existing structure before, and then those people who are involved in the process. For example, using a public convenience, a toilet. In a typical West African society or in a typical Northeast region, we don't use water closet at all. Then somebody who is coming from UK or in any of the developed regions, he's saying, okay, I'm trying to build back better. I want to use the water closet system. Unfortunately, these people in our area do not use water closet system. And that is the beginning of the failure. So people should be engaged in participatory planning, conceiving the idea, planning, and should be involved in the implementation process. Without doing these things, I think nothing will work. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. There is a lot of questions here that is really interesting. I don't like excluding questions, so I don't know how to respond. But there is one question that really, called me on how can we stop corruption from the government sector? I think we discussed here as information is key and information is power. When people are aware of what is happening out there, then it's like more difficult for corruption to have. So transparency is not only about, for me, a notion, but really about a way of doing things and a way of sharing and a way of working. So when we are talking about inclusion, and that means that we need to get the information and the correct one out, because the fact that information is not shared widely means that you give power to some small groups because they got this information that you don't have, and that's why we are ending up now with the case, another question in Madagascar with the misinformation. The people were displaced from the area because of the flooding, but newcomers came, and then the same people give the same place to the newcomers because of information. So they are making money out of it. So that I think that's one of the point that I wanted to say, that we really need to be transparent and have the will to include.
If I may add one comment, I'm sure all of you confront things that happen that should not happen and that are difficult to talk about. And they're difficult to talk about for a reason. One of the cartoons that I wanted to include but we left out was a table with important people, and one of them says, yes, the public wants transparency and it is important, but we also have to consider our need for opaqueness, for others not knowing what we're doing. I have found that putting humor on the table enables the difficult conversation to begin. You need to be prepared to facilitate, to confront difficult moments, but you are invited, as the World Bank has done. I can't explain the privilege. Mr. Bob Mankoff, the cartoonist, and I have been hired as a team by the World Bank to enable conversations about government accountability and citizen engagement. And we created a curated version of cartoons for people to talk, and it works. It is available to you as an idea, and you can build on it and make more awesome things. My task is over now. I'm very grateful to all of you for playing along in this unconventional interactive session. I'd like to pass it over now to Charlotte for some concluding remarks.
Great, thank you very much. And it's no easy task. It's no easy task to summarize the very, very rich discussion this morning and the very different presentations. But I think there are a couple of things that came out for me. I think what all three of them did was to underscore the point that Margaret started off with, that natural disasters do not discriminate, and that poor people are disproportionately affected by disasters. I think in each one of the presentations we also heard about the risks and the opportunities. And Professor Umar, we heard about how Boko Haram insurgency has devastated and destroyed the social and economic fabric of Borno State, pushing people further into poverty. We also heard, and he emphasized, the fundamental need to understand the root causes of exclusion, and in so doing, understand what climate change means in that context, illiteracy and unemployment. He spoke about the need for an integrated approach, an approach to recovery that has to remain flexible and adaptable. He also spoke about the importance of empowering the community as central to community resilience, and linked to that the importance of community ownership and participation in Borno State's recovery. Moving on to Japan, from Murakami-san, we heard a very sobering presentation of the earthquake and tsunami where 1,800 people died and the entire city was destroyed. And I think one of the key messages for me from that presentation was that recovery doesn't happen overnight, and that 8 years later, they're still working on reconstruction, and that reconstruction is being framed using the SDGs. In addition to the SDGs, a certain number of principles have been embedded in their recovery processes, and those include the principles of building back better, the principles of inclusiveness and accessibility, building and baking into recovery universal design features, and ensuring the inclusion of persons with disabilities, and very importantly, ensuring that any kind of infrastructure that is rebuilt is resilient. We then pivoted to the last session from Nino, where she shared with us some lessons learned. Lessons learned around women as key agents in the recovery process. She identified and spoke to us about some missed opportunities where women were not included and what cost that brought to bear on society. She underscored the importance of meaningful participation, of authentic participation, and robust participation, and closed very emphatically by stating that the focus and feature should be on preparedness, because recovery is often too late. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've also been asked to make two final announcements. The one is that there is a pDNA online training today in room 18, so please check that out. And then the second announcement is that on your way out, please help yourselves to a gift. This gift is a very meaningful gift from Kerala, from the land of Chekuti, which is a gift that symbolizes the story of village weavers that overcame the massive flood in India in 2018. So this is what the gift looks like, and I'm going to ask the person who's responsible for this, Gupi, to stand up so that you can get more information from him about these very meaningful gifts. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for a very energized session, and I hope this energy takes you through the rest of the day. Thank you very much.